Hey guys, welcome to the second edition of the QuickSlant Podcast. Hooray! We have video this time! I'm Trevor Rogers, joined once again by my friend Chris Ross. And today we're going to be talking about OU and Kansas finally have their quarterbacks. And then we're going to be talking about the Big 12 teams that are in the top 25. And then we'll talk about the Texas schools, kind of an outlook about how they're going to be this year. So we'll get into it really quick. Chris, how are you, bud?
I'm doing well. Excited to be here. How you doing?
I'm good, man. So Kansas has a new quarterback, Montel Cozart. Is it really going to matter for our friends, our Jayhawk friends?
No, unfortunately not. Michael Cummings was a big loss for them. This is just going to be a year to write off. It's going to be hard for David Beatty and co to kind of gain some traction with this year's squad. I think their only chance to really do anything is probably the non-conference. So, but we'll see. It's just a bad situation for anybody to have to step into. But I do think Jayhawk fans have to really like what Beatty's been saying so far.
I gotta agree. I think Beatty has taken. I think he seems to be one of those coaches that's going to be going in the right direction. Obviously, he's not a Charlie Weiss. He's not a Turner Gill. Kansas is, after Mangino and kind of the success we saw Mangino have. That's a tough job. That's not going to be an easy job for anyone. And so I'm with you. I don't know. I think that the best thing that Kansas could do right now is let's get Cozart in there, and Kansas has to establish an identity. And so Cozart being Beatty's first quarterback, I think that is huge for what Kansas is going to do in the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, they have to take it back to basics, and that's what Beatty, to have any chance in any game, Beatty has to just instill the fundamentals and just do those things right, limit penalties, and just take it back to the basic building blocks of football and build from that.
I completely agree. Let's go ahead and move on to Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield. Kind of no surprise, really, that Baker Mayfield was named the starter. Some people thought maybe Trevor Knight might slip in there, maybe Cody Thomas. What are your kind of thoughts? Is Baker Mayfield really going to be the guy for OU this year?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, you look at Lincoln Riley's system, and of the three quarterbacks that OU has to choose from, Mayfield's the guy that fits that system the best. He's familiar with it from his days at Texas Tech. It kind of all derives from the Leach system. So I think that he's the guy. It was a little surprising to have Knight named the captain, to have that kind of official title. But I don't think Mayfield's going to have any problem being the leader on that team and going from there.
I'll be really interested to see if they use Knight at all this year, because I don't think by any means that Trevor Knight is somehow out of the picture, whether that be like maybe a position change but definitely from a leadership role. I wasn't surprised actually to see him named as a captain, because that team, I really do think they admire him. And the way I look at Trevor Knight is, to me, he was the quarterback that wasn't. But I mean that in the sense of, I don't ever think Trevor Knight really got a fair chance to really establish something great at Oklahoma, because one, he had an identity crisis with kind of who the offense was going to be. Were they going to be a pass-heavy offense? Were they going to be a true read option offense, which is what Trevor Knight is. He's a read option quarterback. And then he had injury problems, and so you never really got to see him establish any kind of consistency. They never really got to use him and roll him out of the pocket. So that being said, I think Baker Mayfield, you're right, is the right guy for the job. He's kind of that prototypical quarterback for this type of system. What little we've been able to see, Mayfield definitely has the best mechanics out of him, and so it's just going to be Mayfield's definitely going to be a system type quarterback, I think.
I think you're right about Knight. I think we will see him, and it'll be kind of Blake Bell-esque, where he's not running the bulldozer or the belldozer or anything, but he's running plays designed for him, sprinkled through different parts of the game.
Maybe kind of like a Wildcat thing.
Yeah, and honestly, I think you might see kind of what Oklahoma State did with Chelp and Walsh, where Walsh was the run guy there. And then all of a sudden, Chelp would take off down the field from you, and that's not what you're expecting. And I think you might see that from Mayfield. They use 9 to run that read option, and then all of a sudden they run it with Mayfield, and you don't expect it.
That's what makes OU so interesting to me this year. Is that obviously there's a lot of question marks, but as just a football fan, I think you have to look at this team and say, what this offense is going to do is going to be fascinating because we really don't have any idea. For the first time, I think, in the Stoops era, nobody knows how the offense is going to look.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that's going to be the line. How good is that line going to come together? And that'll be everything else. If the line looks good, everything else is going to look good. If the line struggles, then how well Mayfield performs with pressure. That'll be your question.
It could be a lot. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Inexperienced line. It did. OU is they're such a wild card this year. I don't think anybody really can really peg them down as to what they're going to be. So it should be fun though. At least it gets kind of boring. Talking about you used to have OU and Texas kind of at the top, just doing their thing. But this year, it's kind of fun seeing. Are they going to be 8-5? Are they going to what?
There's a lot of unknown across the board, though. I mean, that's almost every school we look at. There's a lot of unknown, except outside of Baylor and TCU, and unfortunately Kansas. I think we know a little bit there, but yeah, I mean there's a lot of unknown. It's gonna be a fun year.
Just for once, I want somebody to ask David Beatty how Kansas is going to be, what Wayne Selden means to them coming back. Just ask them some basketball questions, just once, just to see how he responds.
Yeah.
You know what?
That'd be hilarious. I don't think he'll take it very well, but that'd be pretty funny.
Yeah. Talking about the Texas schools, kind of the two at the top. We joked about this a little bit yesterday. I saw a headline in CBS Sports that said, "Can Oklahoma take down the Big 12 powerhouses, TCU and Baylor?" And all I just wanted to say was, I can't wait to read that headline 15 years from now when somebody has to say, "Can Texas take down Kansas?" And so it's crazy how the top 25 it really reflects that this year. And kind of, what are your thoughts about the top 25? With TCU, Baylor, and Oklahoma in it?
It is. I very vividly remember a conversation years ago, I want to say 2008, where Oklahoma was never going to lose to Baylor, and I was being told that Oklahoma State will always be little brother to OU, and they're never going to be a dominant school in the Big 12, that they are destined to be that mid-tier forever. They'll never be better than that. Baylor will never beat OU. I mean, those are the things that they're never going to amount to anything. And now you look at it, and it's 7 years later, and Oklahoma State's won the Big 12. Baylor's won the Big 12 twice. I mean, it's everything changes. And then we got Texas has been DOA for the last few seasons, and OU. I mean, they're up and then they're down, then they're back up, and you just don't know what you're going to get out of them.
Right. No, it's kind of interesting, looking at the top 25 from the Associated Press. You've got TCU in at number 2, Baylor at number 4, and then OU down at 19. And so it kind of leads you to believe, you and I talked about this a little bit before the show, about college football playoff implications. And then obviously everyone's criticized the Big 12 so much, yet here the national media is kind of saying, okay, we're going to criticize the Big 12, but right now if the playoff started today, the 4 teams that we would pick to be in the college football playoff, 2 of them would be from the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, that's assuming they take the top 4 teams, but yeah, I mean, I think the message is being sent that the Big 12 is going to get in. I mean, if they have a team deserving, and honestly, OU at 19th, if they beat TCU and Baylor, I think it wouldn't take much for them to get into that top four either. But by putting both TCU and Baylor in that top four to start, it's kind of a clear message that I think there is a little bit of a makeup for last year. The Big 12 kind of got hosed. You know, if it wasn't for Florida State, they had to go undefeated. If they don't go undefeated, they're not in. If Ohio State didn't just destroy Wisconsin, then they weren't in. It was just kind of kind of a perfect storm that against the Big 12, and I think we see this now where they're going to look to atone for that a little bit, and the Big 12 might get more of the benefit of the doubt in tied situations, where it's close.
I agree. The Big 12 was just so interesting last year because even after TCU knocked off Oklahoma, I went on thinking, man, because I looked at both of those teams and I was like, man, both of these teams have big problems because Trevon Boykin turned the ball over twice in the fourth quarter, and then OU fumbled it right away, and so that game within the last 5 minutes, it was really up in the air. And afterwards, I sat there saying, man, OU's obviously not as good as I thought, and then I was like, obviously I thought TCU was a little better. And then TCU goes on to, be without a question after the beatdown they put in Ole Miss. Everybody was saying, "Oh, they definitely got hosed." But at the same time, I saw the same TCU team nearly get beat at Kansas last year, and so I don't know. It's kind of a catch-22 for me about where these schools really stand.
Well, I mean, I think you see that across all of college football where. Kansas, let's make no mistake, TCU went into that game thinking they're going to win. Also, I think we discredit how close Kansas played some people last year. They weren't the Kansas of the year before. They definitely weren't the Kansas of what we think they're going to be this year. They were a little bit better, and they lost a lot of that, and they're starting from scratch again. But they weren't that big of a pushover last year. Now, they weren't contending for anything, but you look at TCU and you look at Boykin, and he's had some very up and down play, but you look under Meacham's system, how much he's flourished, and I think we could see some of that at OU this year, where under Lincoln Riley's system, that where the offense had struggled before, you're going to see some more improved play.
See, going into this season, TCU offers a little, and honestly, don't get me wrong, I'm really happy to see them preseason number 2. I think that's a huge honor. I think Gary Patterson has absolutely deserved it. He's, to me, in my opinion, top 5 coaches in all of college football. What he's done at TCU is nothing short of incredible. That being said, TCU lost a lot in their secondary last year, and so I look at Baylor. They're obviously they're starting over at quarterback, but is it really going to matter? I mean, I look at Baylor and I'm like, man, defensively, these guys are really good. They have 2 of the best players on the defensive line, one of them being Sean Oakland. And so you got to just kind of wonder, who kind of has that advantage going into November when everybody's playing each other and it becomes a grindhouse.
I think talent-wise, no question that's Baylor. I mean, look at any list of top players in the Big 12, whether it be 15, 20, and Baylor, not only do they make up half the list, but their guys are at the top of the list. It's the talent they have right now is just unbelievable, especially when you look at where they've come from. I think what you see with the voting and TCU being put over Baylor is Baylor's schedule. Having to go to Fort Worth, they go to Stillwater, which has been an issue for them in the past. I think that's where the voters kind of see some of that, and they're kind of trying to look at this long term and give the edge to TCU there. Because let's not forget, TCU, was just putting it on them last year until they just fell apart. But maybe they took the foot off the gas and then it kind of got away from them. We don't know. But I do think there is some of that. So I kind of give TCU the edge in the heads-up matchup, but Baylor definitely has the talent.
It's fascinating to me is that you look at all 4 of these school schedules, and it really sets up nicely. The Big 12 could be a really wild finish by going into November, you could have OU, OSU, TCU, and Baylor all without a loss. And so that gives chances. OSU coming in at 26th in the poll. It should definitely be in the top 25 in my opinion. They're definitely a preseason top 25 team. But that gives a chance for OU and OSU possibly to make a push for the Big 12 playoff, or excuse me, the college football playoff. Do you think there's anybody else that we're missing that might be able to climb the polls later in the year?
Oh, without a doubt. As much as sending the message of Baylor and TCU in the top 4 was, only putting 3 teams in the top 25 was a little bit surprising. I think all said and done, Oklahoma State and West Virginia are definitely going to be top 25 teams. You're talking about the late in the season where, it could be a bunch of undefeated teams. Maybe that's not giving enough credit to West Virginia. I'm nervous for Oklahoma State going up there.
Morgantown's tough to play. That's a tough place to play.
And I think West Virginia could be a lot better than we think right now.
It's really interesting hearing Dana Holgorsen talk about defense.
Right? And I mean, their defense, their secondary is going to be scary good. And, that Dana Holgorsen isn't a guy known for defense. So he's going to have an offense take the field. I'm very excited to see what West Virginia offers this year, because I do think that we talked about Oklahoma and Oklahoma State being the dark horse, but I would not be surprised to see West Virginia challenging Baylor and TCU for that spot.
Everybody said last year that it was kind of a make or break season for Dana Holgorsen, and I think he 100% exceeded expectations last year, and so it'll be kind of interesting to see what the expectations are at West Virginia, because I'm with you. They're very low, and I'm with you, and I think West Virginia could exceed them.
Oh yeah. I think they have all the pieces in place to have a very special year, and no one's really paying attention to them either. So that could play into their favor.
We'll go ahead and let's move into last week. We started with the 2 Oklahoma schools. We'll go ahead and move into kind of our Texas preview. Let's start at the bottom with Texas Tech. Little bit of a rebuilding year, so to speak, with Cliff Kingsbury. Is there pressure in Lubbock for Kingsbury to succeed, or do Red Raider fans kind of believe this is definitely a rebuilding year?
Well, Texas Tech is definitely another school that's going to be interesting. We don't know everything yet, and you said the rebuilding, but really they have 17 returning starters. They have some pieces in place to make a run. The problem for Tech is going to be that outside of Kansas State and Kansas, it looks like everybody's getting better, and that's an issue, because for them to get wins, someone else has to take a loss, and I don't know where that's going to happen. So I've been high on Texas Tech early. I've been struggling keeping them above West Virginia. I do think West Virginia is going to be the better team now. But I do think that Texas Tech could fight for that middle position of being, fight with Kansas State and Texas. And I do think they have the tools to be better than both those schools.
Do you think Texas Tech is bowl eligible?
Yes.
All right, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you. If I looked at their schedule, especially with them having to play Arkansas this year, it's not favorable. And I would have to think that they'd have to rack up some wins in non-conference to maybe get to that bowl eligible spot.
And you're right. They're going to need some help along the way. The thing with them, though, is I like what Kingsbury has done this year about, focus on the work, staying out of the media. He didn't like the way things went last year. As much as last year for Dana Holgorsen, it was kind of a telltale year. I think we're going to see that at a Kingsbury this year. There's a lot of unknown at Texas Tech, and we'll get to see pretty early with that Arkansas game.
Possibly, what's crazy to say, in 2015, the bigger unknown is those burnt orange guys from Austin, Texas. They've got a lot of questions. Obviously, is Swoop's going to be their guy? A lot of their recruiting class, didn't kind of pan out nearly as what they thought it would be. There's a lot of depth issues. What's the outlook for Charlie Strong this year?
I don't see a whole lot of positive for them this year. I could be proved wrong, but I kind of think they're going to struggle early. Their schedule is really tough out of the gate. How they handle the pressure, especially if they start Big 12 play 0-3, 2-3 overall, that could be really tough. Or 2-4 overall. Yeah, I mean, depending on that Notre Dame game. The Notre Dame game is kind of interesting. While I don't think Texas is going to be there at the end of this year, I think they're going to be kind of below the 500 mark in the Big 12. The Notre Dame game is interesting because all the pressure's on Notre Dame. Texas just gets to show up and play, and how often does a powerhouse like Texas get that opportunity? I wouldn't be surprised if they stole that win, but I do think that once we enter the grind of conference play, things might kind of fall apart for them, and it could be a tough year for Strong and media attention.
See, to me, I look at this, either Charlie Strong is going to get fired at the end of this year, or Texas is going to be the next TCU, because I think Charlie Strong is a very good football coach. And I don't know. Obviously, they've got some talent issues, but at the same time, I look at this and I say, this is Texas. They've recruited big guys before. They return a couple of key players, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which is Charlie Strong's strong suit, so to speak. I don't know. In a make or break year, it's interesting to see. We've never seen Charlie Strong in this kind of pressured situation, and so I have no idea what the outlook for the Horns is, just because there are so many question marks.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll be gone at the end of this year. I mean, I would not think so. I think he'll still be there next year, but I do think it'll be a win or see ya kind of year next year. And unfortunately, you just can't dismiss 9 players and have the player attrition they've had this year and have that not affect you. They have the tight end position is going to struggle. There's a lot of question marks there, and in a league as competitive as the Big 12, you don't just walk away from that. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be a fight. You're going to lose some games.
We touched on these two a little earlier, but let's go ahead and give Baylor a shot next. In the wake of scandal, and Sam Mays, who's on the 107.7 The Franchise here in Oklahoma City, said this the best the other day. When I have to walk into my locker room and confront my coach about this, as a player, am I really able to look this man in the eye and say, oh yeah, this guy represents me? And so, does this scandal affect Baylor at all this year?
On the field, no. I mean, maybe it'll be a distraction and not letting the players speak. I get that. I think that we're kind of seeing the media make a bigger deal of this than what it is for the players themselves. I think there is some issue there. I mean, Baylor's got a lot of questions to answer. But by all intents and purposes, I do think that when it's all said and done, what Baylor's going to be responsible for is not taking enough action when, not necessarily a cover-up. I don't think they're hiding anything. They just didn't investigate it the way it needs to be done. The Title IX, they didn't have a dedicated Title IX investigation office when the assault happened. They do now. I think that was one issue that played into this. And also, I think there's a myriad of factors where when you look at what happened at Baylor with Ukuwachu, and I learned how to pronounce his name since the last time. But if you look at what happened there, it's there's some he said, she said, and outside of Baylor can't go get hospital records. There was a gag order put on the case, which was put to the DA 8 months after the fact, and then it took another year to prosecute. So how much information did Baylor really have to act on, other than what she said versus what he said? And I don't know. I think there needs to be some action taken. That we need to look at separating the players when things happen, and then when you get definitive information, then you can take more action. But yeah, so there was a ball dropped, but we got to figure out how it was dropped. And I don't know I don't know if there's any ill will or anything, or Baylor wanting to cover up for a player that never saw the field, that kind of thing. It's just kind of a bad deal, but I don't think it'll affect him too much on the field.
Sure. This will kind of jump us to TCU a little bit. What do you think is the bigger loss? Bryce Petty or 80% of the starts in TCU's secondary?
The secondary, for sure.
So we've got TCU, preseason favorite, ranked higher in the preseason AP poll. What does that mean? Do you think right now that gives Baylor kind of the better advantage? Because to me, Baylor is my pick to win the league this year, and it's really not even close.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned this earlier, their schedule is kind of working against them this year. The thing with TCU, I think there's some carryover from last year where people just thought that they were better. People thought TCU were better, and I don't think that people are necessarily looking at their player attrition this year. They just see that TCU is expected to be very good. They were better than Baylor last year, so they're better than Baylor this year. And then you have the fact that they're playing in Fort Worth. I think that plays into it. That'll be. I think it's that, but clearly on paper right now, Baylor is the superior team. There's not too many outside of Ohio State. I don't think there's anyone else better on paper in the country. They're
kind of really. It's almost like everyone is already giving them the national championship this year.
Yeah.
And not saying they don't maybe deserve that recognition. They are very good. I mean, they've got the 3 best quarterbacks in the country on one team. So it's kind of.
That's true. The thing with that though is only one of them can play at a time.
That's true. Well, technically, JT Barrett is.
Yeah, I mean, it transfers, so maybe I'm wrong there.
Right. Or excuse me, Braxton Miller is he's wide receiver now. So that'll be interesting. I like to. I look at TCU, and I look at last year about how they struggled on the road. Now, granted, they kicked butt in the Peach Bowl and made that statement saying they probably deserve to be in the playoff picture. But I look at TCU, and the big game that really stands out to me is them going to Norman. And I look at a really mediocre OU team that didn't have much of an identity last year that really had a chance to beat them in Fort Worth last year. And I got to think, going to Norman, that could leave a black eye on TCU's season.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see anybody get through unscathed. What I think is going to happen is TCU is going to stumble along the way somewhere, and maybe that is to OU, and then Baylor loses in Fort Worth, and then TCU gets the heads up. That's what didn't happen last year. Now this year we have the tie break, so that's why I think TCU is getting the edge. As far as the rankings go, but honestly, whoever takes care of business is gonna be there.
Someone is losing to West Virginia. It happens every year. It's got to happen again this year.
Yep. No, that's definitely West Virginia. They're going to surprise some people, and they're going to be really good. The Big 12's got to watch out. The worst thing that could happen is multiple 2-loss teams, and no one's really standing out.
That's honestly my biggest fear, because I look at some of the teams in the Big 12, and I don't know if it's maybe the league won't get enough credit for it, or maybe that these teams really aren't as good as we think. I look at every team, the top 4 teams in the league. I look at all of them and I say, okay, I see 2 losses here, I see 2 losses there, I see 2 losses. That's my biggest fear is I think by the end of conference play, you're going to have a lot of teams with maybe 2 and 3 losses, and I definitely don't see an undefeated season for any of these teams, and it's really tough for me to say that I see a 1-loss season for any of these teams.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the best chance there is going to be your TCU and Baylor.
Sure, absolutely.
Or anybody else. The one good thing outside of that is Oklahoma State has, they play OU, TCU, and Baylor in Stillwater. Their biggest question marks are going to West Virginia and going to Texas if Texas is any good. That'll be their biggest road challenge. But so they could surprise some people. But then again, that's what's making it harder for Baylor and TCU to go through, with a 1 loss or undefeated.
It's crazy to me that Oklahoma State, in the Stoops era, Oklahoma State has definitely had more success in Norman than against OU than they've had at home. That's what's crazy to me.
I do think we'll see some of that craziness hopefully kind of subside this year in the Bedlam series. I think that the loss of probability kind of went out, and we'll see Oklahoma State win at home. But yeah, again, that's another game we'll be watching. You mentioned something a minute ago where last year, the games at the end were the ones that mattered, and everybody's paying attention. And really, it's been that way in the Big 12 for quite a while. Bedlam has meant something every year for the last several years. Even going back to 2009 and 2010. Well, maybe not 9 because OU kind of struggled in 9. But
still shut out OSU and Norman.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yep.
But, you see that, those have meant something. And even last year you had the Baylor-Texas game mean something. That's kind of, it's going, those games at the end of the year, it's kind of odd how that's worked out. Even without a conference championship, the games at the end are kind of deciding everything.
It's weird, definitely there's been a power shift in the Big 12, and it should be another fun season. There's a lot of question marks with every team in the conference this year, so it should be a lot of fun. Chris, thank you very much for coming on again. Let's do this again next week. We will have a guest next week, so stay tuned for that. We'll talk. We'll probably get into a little bit. We'll get into West Virginia next week a little more, and then let's talk. We'll talk the Kansas schools, and so it should be fun, guys. Thank you for